Professor will take Daud, note the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The CS nominee, you have promised regarding passports a couple of times, and you know passports are the most important. You initially said within a day, within a week, within 2 weeks, but apparently the passport issue has not been sorted out. The other issue is regarding the IDs. Your department has rolled out that IDs will be 10 years, whereas we have known all along IDs did not have an expiry date. What informed the decision for that one? Because now we've got Maisha number, which has been already declared unconstitutional. But what was the point of launching Maisha number when we had a hudud instead of all those and data protection? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Professor, you can answer those from Ferdinand and Rahim.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the question by the member for Kwanza, Haiti is a United Nations mission. Therefore, our officers are covered, insured, paid for by the United Nations, and therefore there is no cause of alarm. But it's also good to report good progress so far, because the officers, they have been able to get part of the critical infrastructure, the port, the airport, the main police station have been recovered, and the hospital have been recovered from the gangs. And some of the gang leaders who were taunting us before have even signed for peace and are willing to engage. So they are doing a good job. We are praying for them. We hope there will be no untoward incidents. With regard to the second issue from the member for Kwanza, it is true we disarmed 400 National Police Reservists who were serving in Trans Nzoia. And there was a reason, because the NPRs were being misused. Number two, Trans Nzoia is fairly peaceful, except along the border, small issues. So we will be vetting and returning on a needs basis a smaller number of NPRs, but the number of 400 NPRs in Trans Nzoia was disproportionate with the challenge that we have in that county compared to other counties that are a little more needy. Then finally, the member for Imenti North asked about passports. When I assumed office, passport was a crisis like no other. Kenyans were waiting for a year, 6 months, 3 months, 8 months. They were bribing. They had to bribe to get passports. We had no printers, and so forth and so on. Today, we have not only paid the pending bills to the suppliers, we have enough printing equipment for personalization of passports. We have even upscaled our system, that is the ICT system, and we have cleared the backlog from 784,000 when it was at the highest, and today there is no backlog. We are issuing passports within 7 days, starting 1st of August, today. That was our deadline. We complied with that deadline 4 weeks ago, at the beginning of July. Our next deadline is therefore to bring the passport waiting period to 3 days by 1st of November this year. And we are on course. I am very happy. This is one area where we've made a lot of progress. Of course, there are small challenges here and there. We believe that we've not eradicated corrupt staff completely. We have a new crop of staff, about 120, but we are not sure that corruption has been eradicated from that directorate. And we are working on that to ensure, we'll be working on that if we are approved, to ensure that we clean up the whole place. With regard to IDs and Huduma number and Maisha number, The reason for the 10-year limit is because of technology, because unlike the ID that we are used to, the second generation ID we have, the third generation ID is a technology card, and technology keeps on growing old, and therefore that's why we have a 10-year period, and that's why even passports, they normally have a time frame. You cannot have a passport for life. That is the idea. It is not to punish Kenyans. The card has a bit of technology chips, and we want to upgrade that chip based on the security threats that will be identified by that time. The Maisha number issue is before court. We hope we will vacate the orders that were issued 2 days ago, because the problem we are having with delays with issuance of IDs is because of court orders. Last year, between November and March this year, there was a court injunction against us issuing IDs, which brought a huge backlog of almost 600,000. We cleared that backlog. We were actually left with 92,000 with those in the waiting list. And then another court injunction was issued again 2 days ago. We hope we'll be vacating it by Friday, hopefully, so that we can be able to move on with issuing IDs to the people of Kenya. I submit.
Mercy.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Let me take you to the budgets. Following the recent government budget cuts across all sectors, what innovative ways will you use to mitigate the negative impacts of the budget cuts in the Ministry of Interior and National Security? Secondly, what will you prioritize if approved? What programs will you prioritize, and what will be the impact of implementing those priorities? And Kenyans are also asking, because of the unemployment situation in the country, is the recruitment of police officers affected by the budget cuts? And if not, what innovative ways, again, will you use to recruit them differently? Because as it stands, Kenyans are concerned that recruitment of police officers has become a preserve of the rich or of those who can afford to sell some land. So how are you going to make sure that employment opportunities in the Ministry of Interior are open to all Kenyans, irrespective of their tribe, their religion, where they come from, whether they have money or not? Thank you.
I hold Professor. Yes, Missy, take those two.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prof, you'll go down the history as the first minister to be vetted twice in one term, one presidential term. Of course, the others who are coming, but for now you are the first, and that history will not be, will be there forever. And I'll take you back to what you said in the Senate, that history is replete with strong and powerful dictators who are brought down by the power of the people. And I dare say you've been brought back here to this vetting by the power of the people. I want to refer you to an event, because you are a member of the National Security Council. This is the core of the security of this nation. I want to refer you to an event in history in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, something I know you are much aware of because you are an international law student or professor. During this time, the then president of US, J.F. Kennedy, had a standoff with the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev. And there was an EXCOM committee members, comprising of 14 members, almost akin to what we have here as the National Security Council. All those 14 members agreed that to deploy. It took J.F. Kennedy brother's advice to do otherwise. I'm not asking you to be consulting your brother, but if it were not for the brother's advice, then we could have experienced the first nuclear war to the destruction of the world. Now, I look at the events that have happened here as a result of either good or bad decision of the National Security Council. And just like somebody said, that there is always an inclination towards consensus, even if a decision is bad, that the committee of people could easily incline towards psychological consensus to the destruction or to the results of a bad decision. Does National Security Council of this republic also suffer from groupthink? Groupthink in a way that there is no devil's advocate to give an alternative decision making that can save the country. Then, Speaker, if you may allow me the last, very brief. You've tried to explain the donning of the uniform, the police uniform. What surprises me, Prof, is that you give instructions to police, you give press conferences, you are adorned in the uniform of the police. But when it comes to the crimes committed against humanity by the police, that's where you say the police are independent. How independent is your uniform?
Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the budget cuts, we will prioritize what we consider the 5 biggest national security threats in our programming. And those are the threats of terror, organized crime, drugs, the need for drug controlling narcotic drugs, the fight against climate change, and also extremism in its various forms, religious, political, or whatever extremism, because extreme behavior can annihilate the nation. With regard to recruitment, going forward, we will ensure that each and every Kenyan, boy or girl who is recruited, can be accounted for, because in the past we've had so many claims of corruption and so many claims of favoritism, and therefore going forward it's going to be demanded from the police that they account for every recruitment slot that they fill. We have a big problem of corruption in the country, and we hope the National Police Leadership Academy and the programs we want to put there as we look for succession management and new managers of security will be able to fight corruption in the National Police Service. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Amisi asked me, I think the first was just a comment. He said, I've been brought here by the power of people, and I want to say happily, yes. Happily, yes. With regard to the second, and I say happily because it's important for public officials to be put under scrutiny and be measured using the highest possible threshold. So I have no issues, I have no problems. Even if I'm brought here 20 times, I will happily come back and try and explain myself to the people of Kenya and to the representatives of the people of Kenya. I've been asked, the second one, the last one, from the Honorable Amisi, was on whether the National Security Council is suffering from groupthink, and the answer is no. I submit.
Mukami? Honorable Mukami?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to ask our Waziri one question from a police officer who is concerned. I understand there is a court battle in the court since 2018 between the police constables. There are those who are earning higher salaries than the others. That means there are those who are in job group J, they are earning more salary, and that is why they had gone to the court, because they want to understand why there is a discrimination. The other question, it's about our police officers. Waziri, as you know, our officers really do a lot of work. What policy are you going to put into place to motivate our police officers? Because there are those officers who have stayed in one station for over 20 years. They've never been promoted. They've been never transferred. They are just there in that station. So we need to motivate them. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Mishi, Honorable Mishi.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, I want to ask Professor one question. Professor, as the women of this country, we are shocked and we are sick to see the rising number of femicide cases. In fact, we are really shocked when we saw the bodies which were discovered at the quarry, because all the bodies were for ladies or other women. I don't know what is the root cause of this. What contributes to all this? Who slept on the job? We need to know some answers on these issues. Second, Honorable Chairman, I know he has answered issues on the issue of officers using excessive force during protest, but I also wanted to hear from him, what future plans do you have to ensure that future protests are going to be managed in a way that there'll be no loss of lives? Thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Professor.
Mr. Speaker, sir. With regard...
Hold, Professor Emaso, you have a point of order?
I think the nominee forgot to respond to mine.
Which one?
It was on the budget and the issue of recruitment.
He did.
I think I can respond together.
He did.
Okay.
He did, very clearly. I know I was misleading you to raise that issue.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the police officers who have been in court about salaries, mainly these were graduate police constables, people or officers who joined at constabulary level. During their time, they went to school and studied for a degree. They have been arguing that they need to be taken straight to inspectorate. And there has been a long court battle. As soon as that court matter is settled by the apex court, we'll implement whatever decision will come from our judiciary. With regard to that matter going forward, we will implement the recommendations of the Maraga Task Force, which creates two-tier police service where you can serve in the lower ranks, and the academic requirements are different. You serve from constable to senior sergeant, or you enter the police service at inspectorate level if you are a graduate as a cadet, so that we professionalize a little more the police service and also expedite leadership generation through cadets who can assume responsibility as OCSs and commanders at county level and so forth, to avoid a situation where you have officers seeking to extend their time in office at senior levels simply because of a lack of generation of younger commanders. With regard to the motivation, we are working with the National Police Service Commission, and if I am approved, I will proceed with this discussion to provide a clearer policy on promotions, transfers, and some form of reward system which will help motivate our officers. At the moment, before I left office, we were implementing the 3-year transfer policy. I think we were at 45% compliance because of the logistical and the financial implications. If I am reappointed, if I am approved by this House, I will complete that 3-year transfer policy to make sure that it happens. And also, we will have a fast-track promotion arrangement for officers who do very well. For example, if you're a county police commander, you help in reducing crime, you help in fighting femicide, you help in fighting you have certain targets which you meet. you should be promoted faster than somebody else who is in the same level, but their performance indicators are in the negative. Finally, I've been asked 2 questions by the Honorable Mishimboko. The first one is on femicide. It is true, the cases of femicide we are seeing are worrying for the country, and it's also true we have critical gaps, especially at the lower levels of our policing and security apparatus, both the National Intelligence Service, the National Police Service, and also Ngao. And those are things that we need to work on to avoid situations like what we are seeing. The incident that happened in Kware is quite devastating, quite a grave breach of the security of our women, and it's something that I'm taking with all seriousness. Finally, what plans will I have if I am approved by this House to ensure that we do not have loss of life when citizens exercise their right under Article 37? I will be finalizing for publication the guidelines under the Public Order Act, the one I explained earlier, not to take away the light, but to facilitate, to create an environment where it can be enjoyed, to create responsibility on those who are having protests. Because if you say you have a protest to Parliament, for example, and the designated area for protest can only accommodate 1,000 protesters, you cannot say, I want 2 million protesters outside Parliament, because it's not feasible. So we'll have to give those guidelines so that as Kenyans can enjoy these rights while respecting the rights of others in accordance with the Constitution. I submit.
Sharia?
Thank you, Chairman. CS nominee, in the court of public opinion and in some independent surveys done in this country, the Ministry of Interior and National Administration has been identified as the one with the highest prevalence of corruption in this country. How do you intend to address this menace if approved?
Let's take Honorable Russ also.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Professor, when a Kenyan reads a Gazette notice of Kenya Gazette, they will tend to believe that is the true reflection of a policy direction from government. In March this year, you closed the Ilo gold mine in Moyale, that it will be closed for 30 days following the skirmishes that had taken place. But since then, over 30 lives have been lost, including that of security officers. That particular area has turned out to be a black market for mineral entrepreneurs, and the citizenry have generally lost faith in government and also in the security agency. My question to you, if the House approves your nomination, what is it that you are likely to do to reaffirm the community's faith in that the government does what it says it will do, and also that the security of that area, because Dabel has the inhabitants community, that the security is restored. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, those of us who come from the border areas, we have very porous borders. There's influx of arms, contraband, drugs, and also illegal immigrants. But what we are experiencing also is so many roadblocks and checkpoints. Some actually are rent seekers as opposed to for purposes of security. Professor, if the House approves your nomination, what is it that you are likely to do to ensure there is security for Kenya, but also the communities that are traversing or traveling on those roads are not, to an extent, inhumanly disadvantaged? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Professor.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the question by the Honorable Shrie, it is true corruption is a big cancer in the National Police Service, in the public sector of our country, the 2 levels of government and the 3 arms of government. In our assessment of national security threats that are existential in nature, I have said earlier we have identified 5 existential threats to our country's future. Terrorism and violent extremism is one of them. Banditry and other organized crimes is the second. The third one is the problem of narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, and all that goes with that. The fourth one is climate change and how it is creating disruption of livelihoods and breeding conflicts among communities. The fifth one is corruption. And therefore, going forward, if I'm reappointed, I am going to escalate programs, policies, and measures to eradicate corruption within the organs of the national security that are within the Ministry of Interior, but also propose for the rest of the country, the rest of the government and public sector, measures that can help us secure the country, because it's no longer an issue of the corruption by the police. It's an issue of corruption being able to actually threaten the country's future. And therefore, corruption is top 5 of our national security threat. Lastly, I've been asked about by the Honorable Didoraso about Hilo. It is true. Hilo gold mine in Dabel, Moyale, we closed in March for 30 days, but we've extended those orders. We have identified that area as a disturbed area because we lost some people there who were fighting over mineral rights, mainly illegal miners who had come, even some of them from other countries. So we closed it on security considerations. We are in talks with the Ministry of Mining to see how an orderly resumption of mining activities can happen. I was there physically in June. I was planning to go back in July before this happened. In the interim, we have lost a few people because of illegal activities around there, even as we speak, on a very low scale though. We even lost 2 police officers in the last 2 weeks. So as soon as if I am approved, as soon as I'm in office, I will prioritize the Dabel issue to ensure orderly resumption of lawful mining activities to the benefit of the communities that are there. With regard to borders, the multi-agency roadblocks we have, especially the one in Archer's Post, the one in Mombasa, the Garsen-Malindi Highway, all the multi-agency roadblocks are working well, including the Kanyonyo one, the one on Garissa Mwingi, Nairobi Highway. What the criminals have done, those who smuggle arms and aliens and drugs, they are using alternative routes. What am I going to do? The same multi-agency approach that we have used on the main highways. We will increase our surveillance and put multi-agency effort, not necessarily roadblocks, but patrol teams by our special forces on the alternative routes that drug traffickers, human traffickers, and other criminals are using to harm our country. I submit.
Honorable Mule.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, nominee. Honorable Speaker, I want to ask Professor that he came to be the Minister for Interior after the last election and be vetted by this committee and approved, and understanding very clearly the economic policy of the Kenya Kwanza policy of bottom-up economic transformation. You have been in office, and I want to bring you to your attention that the National Assembly put up regulations for private security firms to be regulated properly. And in the view of the better or the bottom up, it was to create employment. But in the time you have been in the office, this industry has suffered tremendous losses whereby you have not given them any regulations. You have not restored order and system in the private sector. And I would wish to know exactly what are you going to do. These private companies have been providing employment to more than almost 1.5 million Kenyans, and they could do better if the government enables proper regulations to create that. And you revoked the license of the Private Security Regulatory Authority, whereby 9 companies plus in this country have not been able to create employment. Are you in the tandem of the idea of creating employment or making sure that there is no more employment and reducing the tax collection for the government? Because that is in your docket, whereby you need to create environment. And being the last person, Mr. Speaker, I would wish to ask the CS to give us a number of activities he has participated in pro bono work in this country, preview to being a CS or after being nominated as a CS in this country. And last but not least, CS, the issue, I'm the last one, so I just want to give him 10 minutes to respond to me. The nominee, the issue of ID in this country is really, really alarming, especially to the young people who are intending to join institutions of higher learning. And I can assure you, quite a number of them, they are not able to register or for admission in the Institute of Higher Learning. What can you do better to make sure that every young people, and especially the Gen Zs, immediately they are clearing their secondary school, they acquire their IDs at the tail end of their Form 4? Why do we have to wait for them to get out to the field and start struggling to get this opportunity? What collaboration will you do with the Ministry of Education? By the time these young people leave school, they already have an ID. We don't need to wait until they get out here to start struggling. What measures are you going to put if, and I'm using the word if carefully, you'll be approved by Parliament and this committee?
Professor.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the private security regulations emanated from our ministry, of course, were presented to National Assembly for approval. So those regulations themselves speak to the fact that we've been actively involved in generating policy, guidance, and framework for this very critical sector. In fact, it is my belief, having interacted now with the ministry for 21 months, that the private security, if a little bit regulated in terms of the curriculum and the kind of content those that are recruited there go through, can help us in providing security for some of the private and not so critical installations. And we can vet some of the deserving cases to even be armed, so that instead of having a police officer manning a supermarket or even a bank, sometimes like it happens in Uganda and other countries, you can have very qualified private security people, vetted and armed to supplement the work of the police, so that we don't overstretch the national police officers. On the second issue from the Honorable Mule, it is true that the Private Security Regulatory Authority had revoked 9 licenses. The 9 companies appealed to the Cabinet Secretary, and I reversed that revocation in accordance with Section 43 of the Act. So those licenses that were revoked, they were reinstated on appeal. Then the issue of pro bono work. Pro bono work, I understand it to mean unpaid work. That's the understanding of pro bono work from my very limited legal background. I don't know, like which one now, maybe in church or at home or where. Because since I became minister, I have no free time to do anything. I have no time to do anything. I hardly sleep. I hardly have a weekend. Night and day are the same for me. But before then, I used to volunteer in many activities, some organized by Law Society of Kenya, some organized by church organizations, etc., etc. The last question by the Honorable Mule is on identity cards. We have suffered the current discomfort because of court injunctions. That's number one. Court injunctions for 4 months between last year and early this year, and right now there's even another court injunction. Number two, we have suffered the disruption because of change in technology from the 2nd generation ID to the 3rd generation ID. And I have explained the need for us to change the technology, because the current ID we have, the 2nd generation ID, cannot be recognized outside this country. It cannot even be a travel document. The security features are very rudimentary, very basic. And therefore the move to new technology, better technology, more secure document has caused disruption. Court injunctions have also caused destruction. And just like passports, in the event that I am reappointed, because the member said he used if deliberately, of course, I also want to promise, if I am reappointed, the same way I have focused on reforming the immigration directorate and helping unclog the passport inefficiency problem, I will focus on IDs and also birth and other citizen documents to ensure that we get optimum results. In fact, for example, a death or birth certificate should be obtained the same day, within 12 hours on application. And perhaps the ID, we should be able again to once we get out of the court injunction, we should be able to retain the 7-day target. At the moment, we are working with 21 days before the injunction.
Thank you, Minister nominee. Sorry, Naisula. I didn't want to go another round.
No. Speaker, I will not. After this nominee, I'll never ask for another round, and it's not a question, it's just a comment, because I'm very passionate about the issues on North Rift, and if the nominee happens to be approved by this committee and the National Assembly, I would like to just say that even as you deal with security matters and the hardware, please remember also peace and dialogue of those communities. Now that there seems to be some semblance of calm, this is the best opportunity to now engage those communities to deal with the stereotypes, and also for them
to be able to remove the criminals among the communities. Please, in case this committee passes you, approves you, ensure that you have a budget that will help you to engage the communities so that we can deal this issue once and for all. For Shakahola and Kware and all the other issues, we want to see action and not just talk.
Yes. Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for the supplementary one. In conclusion, CS nominee, your appointing authority has considered to the country that one of the failings that the President considered to was lack of communication. You have told us here of very good measures that you have taken in the State Department for Immigration, especially in the processing of passports and all that. However, that information is never in the purview of the public, members of the public. And indeed, I have an incident, CS, where a Kenyan in the US called me very desperate that they could not get their passport despite having paid somebody about 20,000 shillings. For a passport was, I think the normal charge is about 4,000 or 3,000 something. And when I followed up the case, the person who was even paid this bribe was not an officer at the Immigration Department, and it took the intervention of the Director General of Immigration, Ms. Evelyn, to get the DCI to hunt for that person. Somebody extorting Kenyans' money from Eastlands, pretending to be working in Nyayo House. And therefore, the lack of communication aspect in your ministry is what I want you to address. Should you, or if you are approved, what are you going to do to ensure that there is proper communication to the public so that the public are not taken advantage of by criminals out there in Eastlands and elsewhere who are extorting bribes from Kenyans on the pretext that they are working in Nyayo House? And just like Owen Bayer said, you once declared Nyayo House a crime scene. That crime scene now seems to have moved from Nyayo House to the periphery of Nyayo House and other areas. I would want to hear what specific measures you intend to take to make sure there is proper communication. Kenyans know how much they ought to pay and to who, and so that they're not taken advantage of, because you are also aware that has been very rampant.
Chairman, thank you. Chairman, I just wanted to ask the CS, this issue of the IDs. Professor, you say the IDs will expire after 10 years. Have you put into consideration the vast areas, people like in North Turkana, how far they travel to get IDs? Because IDs are not like passport, they're essential documents that people must have all the time. After, you know, it will be cumbersome for them to go to those centers to go and get IDs. And secondly, on this unrest, you have seen that, as you have said, the IG resigned. But are you aware, in your absence while you are away, we used to have Baba while you are away, but while you are away, that a new IG was appointed?
He's still away, he can't answer that.
No, but that, what is your take? That we were told 60 years, Mr. Speaker, I'm putting it in a better way.
Yes.
We were told when somebody reaches 60 years, he should leave the public service. Are you aware that a new IG has been nominated who's 64 years or 63 years, who has retired, who is being recycled? I don't know what extra thing is going to bring. And my last question is on illicit brews. The Interior Ministry has been accused by the Deputy President of sabotaging the war in illicit brews. Is the war on illicit brews only being waged in Mount Kenya? What aspects of this war are being undertaken in the Interior Ministry, and what is being done by the Office of the Deputy President? How much funds have been used in this war in the last 2 years when you were the Interior Ministry, before you were fired?
Nominee, on the issue of the IG, I direct you not to answer the question, because I've received communication from the President nominating the nominee, who will be vetted by a committee of parliament, and those questions can be raised there. If you answer that here, you'll be prejudicing what is coming to parliament. Answer the other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Naisula was a comment. We've taken it on board. Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah's issue was about communication. When I assumed office in October 2022, I began a habit of every 3-4 months updating the country on the status of our homeland security. We've not had one in a while. I had planned one for June, which was postponed and thereafter disrupted. We will use our public accountability updates on security matters to communicate more on what we are doing. And the next, if I am approved by this House, the next public accountability address will feature more on the reforms we have made at immigration department, because I think there we've made a lot of success. People concentrate on the banditry thing, but I think also on the passports issue we made a lot of success. Where we still have problems is the IDs and other aspects of citizenship documents. With regard to the ID, the question by the Honorable Junaid Mohammed, the reason for the 10-year limit, there are two reasons. It's actually one reason. It's because of changes in technology. Unlike the ID we have, which has no security features, and therefore it can be timeless. But we'll find a way of making it convenient to the people of Kenya to renew after the 10 years, so that you don't create a crisis by people, and we can do that by even having a phased out renewal process to ensure that, again, we don't inconvenience masses of people. So the problem is technology and the security features in the third generation ID, which is going to be physical, that is the Maisha card. It is going to be also digital, the digital ID. You can have it digitally. So all those are options for the third generation ID, quite sophisticated in tandem with the current trends in security on identity documents. With regard to the issue raised on brews, I would be hesitant to respond to the comment associated with the Deputy President for obvious reasons. But I think, to the best of my knowledge, the Minister of Interior was not cited as frustrating the war. If there are specific officers in the ministry, I think that is something that needs to be looked into to make sure that all of us are reading from the same script. The government policy is to make sure that illicit brews, toxic substances and drugs are not provided to our kids, not just in central Kenya, but everywhere in the country. With regard to how much money the Deputy President office has used, again, I am not privy, and I think that is the office that can answer that question. How much funds have we used in the fight against brew? We have not allocated any special budget in the Ministry of Interior in the fight against illicit alcoholic drinks and drugs. We have used our normal budgets, our normal security operations budget, to carry out that program as part of the normal programs. I submit.
Professor, I'll ask you one or two questions. The first one is a furtherance on the issue of IDs. As you introduce a 10-year ID, just take into account that an ID in this country is everything. You can't enter a supermarket, you can't open a bank account. The old and PWDs cannot access social safety net funds without an ID. Now, if you are going to have that ID last for 10 years, then you must put in place a seamless renewal process so that people don't suffer because of failure to renew an ID card. And if you are approved to go back to office, I would want to see that you draft regulations that will guide and manage renewal of IDs and bring to Parliament for approval. The second issue I want to ask you, nobody asked you, prisons fall under your authority if you are approved. What are you doing or what do you propose to do about prison reforms? I remember when we were senators and we went with you to Kithure and we found prisoners literally half naked, poorly dressed and looking like they were very poor hygienic conditions in which they were operating. What are you going to do, if approved, in prison reforms to make prisons more humane? And also, what are you going to do to reverse the continuing stealing and grabbing of public land occupied by prisons in the country, which is going on all over? Thirdly, the new constitution allows Kenyans who had left the country, taken greener pastures, and acquired citizenships of other countries to reacquire Kenyan citizenship on application. That's what the constitution says. But we get a lot of communication and phone calls from Kenyans out there who are struggling to reclaim their citizenship because they have either British or American or whatever citizenship. What are you doing to simplify? Because the constitution says you reclaim your citizenship on application. What are you going to do to simplify the process of reclaiming citizenship by Kenyans who lost their citizenship? If you can answer those, then I'll come to other simpler questions to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, on the first issue of IDs, I agree with your recommendation and guidance that we should consider seamless transition from after the 10 years to avoid creating a crisis. I believe it will be possible because we had a similar situation with passports when we went into e-passports. So what you do, for example, is to say that the ID that has expired will continue operating until you get a new one, for example, because you cannot be faulted because of a government administrative measure. Number two, we will make sure that we anticipate and put in place a rapid response initiative where you deploy additional facilities, additional service points, additional personnel, even if it's on a temporary basis, at a time when many of these IDs will be expiring. But by and large, the old ID, the expired ID should work until when the state gives you a new one, because it's simply for technology purposes, safety features. It is not that we will give again another ID. It might even be the same depending on whether or not we will consider that ID as being secure, a secure document by that time. With regard to regulations as guided, we will prioritize that, Mr. Speaker. With regard to Kenya prisons, we have part of the Maraga Task Force report. We have a number of recommendations on modernizing and reforming the prisons, which we are taking up. I have prepared a CAB memo, which had not been submitted to Cabinet, but I'm sure if I'm reappointed, that will be a priority. And the areas of reform include making the prison enterprises more productive by investing in better technology in their workshops to make sure they produce more competitive goods which are affordable. Number two, welfare issues.
In fact, these seats you see here were made by prisons.
Absolutely. So if they are empowered, because that is labor and skill is available, if they are given better equipment and for carpentry, for masonry and other skills in the prisons, we're going to have better output and generate more revenue and avoid the prisons relying on S-check all the time in these times of constrained budget. We also want to make sure that we improve on welfare issues, including the terms and conditions of service of prison wardens, is part of the Maraga Task Force recommendation in consultation with the SRC. We also are working on software issues, for example, providing mattresses. We have a program called One Prisoner, One Mattress program, where up to now we have provided 10,000 from our budget, but also with the support of other partners. And we want to make sure that every prisoner at least has a mattress, as we even work on physical facilities and the housing for our prison warders. We want to construct 28,000, and we have already, I think, I don't have the figures right now, but I think we've done nearly 500 in different prison facilities. We want to do 28,000, which should almost meet the entire demand, because that is almost the population of our prison personnel complement. Other than that, the prison land, there are certain serious encroachments on prison land. The most notorious one is the Kithure prison land, where out of the 3,000 acres, only less than 300 are available. The rest have been grabbed by powerful and former senior people in various administrations and their friends. We will have to recover it. We have engaged the National Land Commission and other stakeholders. We will recover the land. Number two, we have provided as a policy that every prison land must have a title deed. Many of our prison lands are not titled, so we are working with our partners. We've been working with our partners in the Ministry of Lands to make sure that every land of prison land is protected through titling. The last question, Mr. Speaker, sir, you asked is about those Kenyans who are regaining citizenship. We have made tremendous progress, and I want to admit, in line with what the Leader of Majority said, I think the communication is what we need to improve on. We have made tremendous improvement and reforms in the processing of citizenship applications by foreign nationals who want to be Kenyans, but also by Kenyans who had lost their nationality before the 2010 Constitution and are now entitled to reapply. When I came to office, there were 2,700 pending applications. I cleared the backlog within 30 days. Right now, we are receiving applications on a rolling basis. I had directed the Directorate to ensure that from the time of application to the time the minister signs off that application for regaining citizenship, it should not be more than 21 days. And I think that is work in progress. Lastly, how do we simplify? We will reduce the paperwork. There is a bit of paperwork in that Directorate, yes. And we want to reduce it and go digital, and make sure that we even bring the timelines from 21 days to 7 days to possibly 3 days on application. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lastly, nominee, do you hold any leadership position in any political party?
No.
Have you ever been adversely mentioned in any integrity-related reports?
No.
On investigations? Do you hold citizenship of any other country?
No.
What is your worth?
694 million.
Made of?
Made of I have 2 homes, one in Nairobi and one in Tharaka Nithi. Then I have landed buildings, about 235 million. My 2 homes are worth 190 million. And then I also have savings in SACCOs and banks. I also do legal practice, so I have a bit of revenue that I've generated through my law firm, and that is it. And I forgot, Mr. Speaker, when I was filling in, I forgot to add higher vehicles of about 17 million, which are not part of that report. I apologize. I remembered after I had submitted the questionnaire.
Honorable members, we received memoranda from one Eliud Karanja Matindi, Isaac Alwacher, Joseph Mwathi Nyanjui, Khalid Ibrahim, Aisha Adan, Sonia Mushila, Masi Murugi Kuria, Ahmed Sigat, Okio Mtato Koit, David Malombe, and Collins Onyango. We forwarded them to the nominee, and the nominee responded to all of them in writing. We have them on record. Professor, we allocated 2 hours. We've done with you 2 hours and 10 minutes. We want to inform you that this brings to an end our interaction with you. The clerk has checked all your documents against what you submitted have been found to be correct and in order. And unless you are lawfully held, you are now released to go to your other businesses. Members, I'll give you a 10-minute health break. Let the CS go alone first so that you are not accused of causing with a nominee. Yes. Yes. How many? Robert Mbui is asking for 15 minutes. It is so directed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.